Hello and welcome. I am Scarpalock. This is City of Heroes. We are with Liberty Lass, our level 49 character who has 3.6 million to go to get to level 50. We're gaining about a million XP per episode, so my guess is there's about 3 episodes left, but depends on whether we complete a story arc and how much XP that story arc completion gives us and so forth. Today we're going to continue our discussion of the 44 quote-unquote rules of D&D. I know originally I said I wasn't going to do all of them, but actually I've had fun talking about them, and some of them have been really interesting to talk about. So while we're doing Worldwide Red, we will continue talking about it with rule number 31. This is more about food and drink. No food or drinks near any of my D&D gear. If you wreck something, you can pay for it. I let one person trash my DM screen once and never had it replaced by them. In fact, that person attempted to gaslight me into believing they didn't wreck my stuff at all. I'm not stupid, you're an adult. Accept responsibility. So, again, this definitely seems like somebody who's been burned. Protect Kestrovich. So I don't know where he is. I guess we're going to go through this the normal way and just fight everybody. I don't know if we're gonna. I don't remember where he is in this mission. So yeah, and this is obviously a GM who's been burned by his players and is very frustrated, and he's now taking this frustrations out on this group. I don't know, because he says in this, I had one person trash my DM screen. He didn't say one of you guys. So this sounds like this may be a GM who's not only had bad experience with this group, but maybe a bad experience with multiple groups. And I wonder how old these folks are. Are they? He says you're adults, so I don't think they're kids. I'm not sure what to make of some of this, because if I spilled soda on somebody's Game Master screen, I would certainly pay. I might not like buy it and replace it, but I'd certainly say, what did it cost? I'll pay you and you can replace it, you know. So I don't know. It's just not very adult behavior. Okay, there's somebody talking over there. So we're gonna head that way after we fight this lieutenant. These guys are super annoying. I really wish if you hovered, you could get rid of it. Oh, this is an ambush. I really wish if you hovered, you could get rid of the debuff from the caltrops. But if you're low enough to actually melee them, the AoE of the caltrops will affect you, and I'm sure that is because the developers felt like they didn't want hover to be like an I win button against caltrops. I don't know how much of an I win button it would be, but I'm guessing that's why it doesn't work. All right, number 32. Arguments between party members outside of roleplay will be resolved by me giving the definite ruling. If you don't like it, go back home. Arguments between party members. So I assume he means arguments among the players, right? If the players start having an argument, he's just going to step in and end it. And if you don't like it, go home. So it seems like his players are acting childish. Maybe they are getting into a lot of arguments at the table. And this, it doesn't sound like the greatest GM in the world, but this really sounds like a horrible group of players that I certainly wouldn't want to play with, right? Given the behaviors he's complaining, he's saying these behaviors will now stop, right? That means they've been going on. I wouldn't have been having any fun with this group. Number 33, I don't give a bleep what they did in Critical Role or what that one guy on Reddit said. If you think that it's all make-believe, so you can do what you want. Hold on, let me reread this. This is badly written. I don't give a bleep what they did in Critical Role, or what that one guy on Reddit said, or if you think that it's all make-believe so you can do what you want. The world I run works on internal rulings and lore I created specifically for it. So this makes it seem like these guys are doing OMG so random stuff, And when he complains about it, he says, well, they did that on Critical Role, or they do it on Reddit, right? But what's strange here is, did he not, in like point number 29 or something, say, stop complaining that D&D is serious and it should be for fun? Maybe he miswrote that, right? Maybe what he's trying to say is, stop saying we're just here to play for fun. D&D is a serious thing. I don't really know, but it seems like all of his other points are raging at his players for not taking the game seriously, not taking his lore and his world seriously, and treating it in this sort of jokish, OMG, so random way. And now he's saying, just because other people are doing OMG, so random stuff, or you think it's all make-believe so you can do whatever you want, this is a real world with real rules, right? We're going to act like this is a real world with real rules. So I don't know, but let's take this at face value. This is a common argument that you hear when somebody doesn't want to follow the internal rules of the world, right? The common argument is, well, it's all make-believe anyway, so you have no justification to say that the magic doesn't work this way in your world. And that's not true. Good worlds, well-done worlds, have rules that are consistently followed. And that's where you get the verisimilitude, right? And if you just randomly do stuff and don't have rules, then the verisimilitude is destroyed. And you guys know I like verisimilitude. And so, yeah, one of the reasons why I preferred watching the Wildcards, Deadlands, and ETU shows to a lot of the other Let's Plays, or whatever you want to call it, actual plays, I don't know what you want to call it, the other performative role-playing game shows, is that they actually had a very consistent world with very consistent rules, and they followed them, right? Even when they kind of made up rules for fun, they still followed the rules. So at one point, Gaurav Galati, like the Jordan Callerman, the GM, would go around the table and ask questions at the beginning, and somehow or other he was talking about what's one thing your character's always wanted and hasn't been able to get, or something like that. And Gaurav made up on the spot that his character had never had popcorn. And somehow or other, between Gaurav and Jordan, they came up with this idea that in the Deadlands world, there's something about the Weird West that makes it so that corn doesn't generally pop. It sometimes does, but it's very hard to get it to do that. And so the popcorn is a rare and expensive delicacy. And then the GM said, okay, have your other characters had it? And Megan said, well, Rosaline was this very high-priced escort, so she's had it because she's had rich men who've hired her, and they've given her popcorn as like a way to impress her or whatever. But Jordan Pridgeon, his character, was a con man or whatever. He said, yeah, he's heard of it, but he's never actually had it. And so then one of the things they came up with was this strange, mysterious old woman called the Popcorn Lady, who had given Gaurav's character Hal popcorn when he was a small kid, and that's why he got interested in popcorn. And so then Jordan Calliman brought the Popcorn Lady into the story a couple of times, and they went to this carnival where they actually had popcorn, and they were role-playing about it, right? So even though they made up this little detail at the beginning of a random episode of the show, they then consistently had the popcorn stuff happening throughout the rest of the campaign, right? For like 2 seasons, 20, 30 sessions, right? That's making the world be consistent, and it makes the world more believable. And so that's one of the reasons I like that show, because they always kept track of things like that, and it made the world more believable to me than worlds where people are just doing random crap. And they don't care if it's consistent, because it's what's random and fun in the moment, right? And so I agree with this GM that the world should have a reality to it, a verisimilitude to it, and that you shouldn't just do random stuff because it's funny, right? Unless you're running a comedy campaign, which, as I've said before, my friends and I did. We ended up not liking it because we prefer cause and effect, and we prefer rules. But it's a very common refrain from the people who want to do the random stuff that, well, this is just, like, there's magic in this world, so anything can happen. No, actually, magic has rules. I'm reading right now my third lit RPG book. All of them have rules. It's actually one of the things that's really special about them is they're very hardcore on the rules, and the rules are very consistent. And one of the writers said that players will even the readers will even have a spreadsheet, and they'll track this stuff. So I'm reading He Who Fights with Monsters, which, like, it's so far about a quarter of the way through it. It's pretty good. I'd say of the 3 lit RPG books I've read, this probably is my favorite. And so the main character meets up with some adventurers and stuff. There are all these rules to the world, right? So, like, he used a magic coin to heal himself, and then right away he used another one, and they're like, "You used another one? There are side effects to that. You have to wait." And he had like a backlash because he didn't wait for the cooldown period, right? And then he found a potion and he drank it, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, you drunk a potion while you were under the backlash of the coins? That's bad." And then he, like, had this hangover almost for a long while, for like hours, because the world has rules, right? Yes, he's basically been sucked into a video game or something equivalent to an MMO, and yes, that world has all this cool magical stuff to it, but it also has rules. Very rigid rules. You have to absorb essences before you can get an attribute raise. And if you're only iron rank, you're going to have trouble against copper rank enemies and stuff. Very role-playing game rule, And so it's a novel. It doesn't have to have consistent rules like that, but it does, and that enhances the believability, right? And so just because magic exists doesn't mean there are no rules. Good magic systems have rules. If you read any of Sanderson's books, every one of his books has an appendix that explains how the magic works in detail, so that you can see that his magic is very consistent and follows rules, right? So the fact that there's magic doesn't mean that there don't need to be any logical rules, right? And that's what people are saying. Like, well, there's magic, the world doesn't have any logic to it at all. No. A good magic system has logic to it. So yeah, and that's the attitude that he's talking about, is this attitude that his players must have, that, since there's magic in the world, any old random thing can happen, and we're not going to respect the verisimilitude of the world. And so, I mean, I would say kind of the same thing. My world has rules, and I expect you to behave as if the world is... have your character behave as if the world is real to them. Okay, 34. Every single person in this chat, so this must have been posted to a Discord, is having debuffs applied to their character that should have occurred a long time ago. This will be specific to characters. So again, this sounds like the GM's fault, right? That the GM has allowed the players to become OP, and now he's trying to correct it, right? He's trying to fix it. And he's trying to fix it, and there's a sense in which sometimes it's too late, right? I realized that my best friend's character was OP in the Rome game when they were like level 8 or 9, right? And all of the custom class stuff that he had created kind of came into fruition, right? And he had said to me, look, because I was very resistant to him making some of this stuff up, and he said, look, don't freak out about this. If it's overpowered, we'll change it. And I even said to him, you and I both know that once you have a thing, you're not going to want me to take it away. And he said, no, I'm not unreasonable. You know me. If something's overpowered, I'll see it, and I'll suggest the correction myself. Well, he was clearly overpowered, and he never suggested any corrections. And when I attempted to impose limitations on him, he resisted. It's no big deal. It's not overpowered, he said. Right? It was. And, I let him have it because I didn't want the argument. And my guess is this GM has done the same thing, right? He let them get away with stuff because he didn't want the argument. Right? And this is why when we did Savage Worlds, I said, look, dude, we're doing rules as written. Nobody's making anything up. He didn't ask to make anything up. And the reason my best friend didn't ask to make anything up in Savage Worlds, which may not be something he would want to admit, because I think He's stubbornly insisting he likes D&D better, and he's going to insist that whether he actually likes Savage Worlds better or not. Savage Worlds is open creation, open character creation. There are no classes and there are no subclasses, and everybody in Deadlands is human, so there's no racial bonuses or anything like that. So he can make his build whatever he wants. He can take whatever edges and powers and stuff he wants that are available to his character, right? And so he can choose what he wants, he can do what he wants, and therefore he doesn't have to say, can I make something up, right? And most of the time, if he were to say, can I make an ability that does X, I would say to him, well, just use this edge. Oh, I didn't even know that edge was there, right? Like when he made up the Huckster, he didn't even know the Hex Slinger existed. I told him the Hex Slinger existed and said, you could make a Hex Slinger. These are really cool. He said, what's that? When I told him about it, he was like, yes, I'm there. That's totally what I want to do, right? I'm the one who suggested it to him because it's an existing edge, right? But so this sounds like this guy made way worse of a mistake than I did by letting all of them be overpowered. And he's now realized that this is breaking the game. It's making the game too easy, right? Remember, there's even reference in an earlier part of one of the earlier rules that the players are complaining that the battles are too easy. So he said, well, if you want them to be hard, you better expect that your character will die, right? Because once you get into hard battles, character death is possible. Who's attacking me? So the players are complaining it's too easy. Well, why is it too easy? Why is it hard for him to challenge them? Because he's probably given them, he's talked about taking loot items away. He's probably given them overpowered loot. He's now talking about debuffing them. He's probably allowed them to take overpowered abilities or allowed them to do things that are unbalanced. And so now he's like, okay, I got to rebalance this because the game is now at the point where it's broken. Right? In fact, it's probably been broken for a long time, and he's lashing out like this because he broke it. So what I would say is, I don't know, this is what I'm saying. At some point, it's too late. Right? When my best friend was 8th level and had been using this overpowered ability over and over again, right? I mean, I was almost, well, you let him do it for so long, it's almost too late to say no to it now, right? Why didn't you say no to it 6 months ago? It can be very difficult once one of the things that Alex Macris talks about in role-playing games is there are the rules, right? And then there are rulings, and rulings are like legal precedents, right? So once you set the legal precedent that paladins get Holy Avengers at 1st level, it's really hard to take that away. So my guess is he doesn't mean debuff here. Like a debuff is something like this, right? This ongoing thing that affects your character. I think what he means is I'm going to nerf stuff, right? I'm going to take away stuff that you had. I'm going to nerf it, right? And like, where does nerfing comes from? It comes from, I think it was Ultima Online. May have been one of the first places where they had allowed loot combinations and ability combinations that were too powerful, and the players were just running through everything too easily, so they down-powered a bunch of the weapons and stuff, and the players said, I feel like I'm running around with a sword made of nerf. And that became a verb in gaming parlance. You nerf stuff, right? They did it here. The Global Defense Nerf, right? The GDN. They cut all the defenses in half. Why did they do that? Because they felt like it was too overpowered. And why did it cause a huge uproar? Because it happened in, what, issue 4 or 5 or something? A year after the game came out, when they were getting ready to put out City of Villains, and realized that some of the defenses would make it impossible for you to lose in PvP, so they had to correct it, right? And players, including me, got really mad. Why? Because they took away something, not that we'd had for 5 minutes, but that we'd had for a really long time, and it had become, to our minds, the base performance of the character. This is the normal way the character should be, right? And they took that away, and people were mad, and that's why they called it a nerf. And so I think what he's saying is, you guys are OP, and I'm going to start nerfing you. But again, as with my case with my best friend, some of the reason for the OP has got to be that the GM has allowed it, right? Now, sometimes, look, you don't realize, right? I know I didn't realize how powerful my best friend's special ability that he made up for his sorcerer was going to be didn't seem that powerful when he only had a couple of sorcery points, right? And then when he was 8th level and he had 16 sorcery points, all of a sudden I'm like, holy crap, this is a really powerful effect. I shouldn't have allowed this, right? And so, yeah, but once you've allowed it and people have used it in game for a long time, it's really hard to take it away. And just saying I'm going to just debuff everybody, I, I don't know. Number 35. If you don't bring your character sheet, you don't play. Um, yeah, I can understand that. Why wouldn't you bring your character sheet? And have they attempted to go there and say, well, I didn't remember my character sheet, I'm going to play anyway? Well, how are you going to play without your character sheet unless you have it all memorized? You know, I don't even have this character memorized. Sometimes I got to click on here to figure out the names of the powers, and I've been using it as much as I have, right? So, but I would say to him, okay, good GM practice is you should have a backup sheet of every character. So if I forget my character sheet, you just hand me your backup. And I remember in Champions, like it was our responsibility to keep the character sheets updated. And the guy who was always late, my best friend, he didn't always remember to update his character sheet. And one time he did forget his stuff, or I can't remember what happened. I think it might have been he came over. We didn't know we were going to play Champions, and then the other guy came over and like, hey, let's play some Champions. And he's like, well, I don't have my 2 characters. I think this was when we were playing X-Men. It was the Bad Rob, me, and my best friend. And I think we thought it was just going to be me and him. And then the Bad Rob couldn't make it. And the Bad Rob was like, yeah, I can make it. This is before he had become a real pain in the neck. And we were still enjoying playing with him. What is attacking me? And so he came over. He had his character sheets. We were at my house, so I had my stuff. My best friend didn't have his stuff. But I'm like, that's okay. I have your backup sheets of... who the heck were his characters? Storm and Kitty Pryde, I think, were playing the X-Men. And he was like, "Oh, these aren't updated. They don't have like the last set of powers." Like, well, too bad. You should have updated it. So he had to play his characters with like 10 or 15 fewer power points than they were really supposed to have, because he didn't have his originals. He had the backups, and the backups were not up to date. Well, that's your responsibility, right? But always have a backup character sheet for all players so that you can play without them if they don't show up. Next point, number 36. If you don't bring dice, borrow some. Well, I mean, that's obvious. Are you? And some of this just seems like over the top. Is he really suggesting here that there are players who have shown up to this session without dice and sat there and said, I can't play because I didn't bring dice, and not thought to borrow them from somebody? I don't know about this group, but in most game groups, people have multiple dice sets. And they bring multiple dice sets, right? Because if nothing else, they want to be able to switch dice if they feel like one set of dice. Gamers are so superstitious. If a D20 rolls low too many times, they'll put that die aside. They put it in what's called dice jail, and they go get another die, right? Because, yeah, gamers are really superstitious, and they think that die is just rolling bad right now, and I need new dice. I need better luck. So I don't know if I've ever seen a role-playing game that I've played with other players where almost everybody didn't bring extra sets of dice. So, yeah, you can almost always get dice from somebody else, and I find it hard to believe that he and his players never thought to borrow dice before. So this seems to me like him just saying, remember your dice, and if you don't remember them, just borrow some. Well, I assume that's what they have done. So this seems a little like a silly rule. I mean, it's like, you don't need to say that. 37. When we play D&D, I am not your friend. That doesn't mean you treat me like an enemy during the game. It means I'm no longer being nice. Well, if you're not going to be nice, why should the players? I've said this before. In a good D&D game, or in a good role-playing game, the GM is your friend. He's your friend, and as your friend, he wants to make the game fun. This guy, I don't know if he wants to make the game fun, but I completely disagree with that. I would say to my players, if I had to make a statement like this, even though I'm the GM and I'm role-playing the parts of your character's enemies, I am always still your friend. And you should know that whatever I'm doing because I think it will be fun and enjoyable and will give us a great experience. I'm not always going to get it right, and I may do some things that you absolutely hate, but I didn't do that on purpose, and my goal is always to have us all have some fun, right? And if you're not having fun, please let me know and I'll do what I can to correct it. And, as long as you having fun isn't stepping on the fun of other people, including me, right? I get to have fun too. I'll always be happy to try and make course corrections. So I would say I am your friend, and always remember that I'm your friend, and that our goal as a group is to have everybody to have fun, and that's what I'm trying to achieve. I might not succeed, but even though I'm role playing your enemies, I am never your enemy, and I'm always your friend. So I don't know why. Are we getting ambushed? Yeah. I don't know why you would word it that way, except that he really doesn't want to be their friend. I don't know. Yeah, the GM should be your friend, and you should be able to tell he's your friend, or her, or she's your friend, right? I mean, you can definitely tell in Critical Role that Matt Mercer and the players are friends. There is no question about that, and you can absolutely tell in the Wild Card Show that Jordan Caves Callerman and the other players are friends, right? Heck, he's married to, or was married. I don't know if they're still married, but he was married to Megan Caves, who was one of the other players, right? And they actually became friends as they did the show. Like Gaurav, I think, didn't know them that well, and I'm not sure how well Jordan Pridgeon knew Megan and Jordan Callerman. I think Dom Zook was good friends with Megan and Jordan, but over the course of playing Deadlands, they became really good friends, and they were super good friends during ETU. You could tell it, right? I remember them asking like, "What's your normal schedule like as you're prepping?" And during one of their talkback sessions, and after each season, they do like what they call a campfire, and they sit around the campfire and talk about the season, and it's all out of character. And somebody asked like, "What's your normal like prep for the day when you're doing a session?" Because they start at like, I think it's 8 o'clock on a Friday, and they go till midnight or whatever. And one of the things they said, Megan said, "I make dinner for everybody," right? So she likes to cook, I guess. And I don't know, I don't think they go to their house. I think she makes the dinner and then brings it to the studio, and they all have dinner together. And then they play, right? This is a group of friends. I'm making dinner for you, and we're having my dinner, and we're all having dinner together, right? And that's how it should be. Not, I'm not your friend, right? And he's like, I'm not your friend, but you shouldn't consider me an enemy. But I'm not going to be nice. No, the GM should be your friend. 38. If you treat me poorly in any way, shape, or form, after or during or before game, due to something that happened in the game, you're out. If you cannot separate game from reality, I think you are a moron, and I have little time to deal with that energy. Now, again, I don't like the way this is worded, but it is definitely the case that players need to separate, right? What I used to call in character, ICOOC separation, in character, out of character separation. You need to be able to separate what's happening to your character from what's happening to you as a player. Um, when your character is attacked by a monster that I control, I am not attacking you, right? I am judging in my capacity as the controller of all monsters and NPCs that this monster in this moment would be the most likely to attack you versus anybody else. And so that's what I'm having it do. I'm not picking on you. The monster is picking on you. Matt Colville said this. I'm not trying to kill you. The monsters are trying to kill you. Right? And it's his job as the GM to evaluate how the monsters are going to behave and have them act accordingly. And as a player, you're supposed to want him to do that. Right? Because that's how we have fun. You're role playing, right? We're living in a fictional world. We're trying to generate a narrative, a fiction, right? And in order to generate the narrative, you got to have antagonists. Somebody's got to play the antagonists. If you don't want to do it yourself by soloing an Ironsworn game, then you need a game master who plays the antagonist for you. Well, if the game master's playing the antagonist, they have to antagonize, right? So you definitely shouldn't take out of game what happens in game. Right? Now, if you honestly believe the GM is being unfair, then there may be some out-of-game discussion, right? But as I've said before in this subject that we've been talking about for the last 3 episodes, um, if you feel like the GM is being that unfair, you should quit the game. Number 39, you will submit your spell list daily in-game. If you do not give me a spell list each in-game day, you will not be able to cast a single spell or cantrip. I do not trust you guys to not use this against me. So this is exactly what we're talking about here, about this GM and the players and how they have a toxic relationship. He doesn't trust his players. He thinks they're cheating on what they said, right? So in D&D, the way it works in D&D, I don't have to worry about this in Deadlands, right? Fortunately, because you just get a set of powers and you don't change them every day. But in Dungeons & Dragons, you have a list of potential powers in your spell book or in your repertoire. You might have 15 possible first level spells that your character could potentially memorize or prepare for the day. And after a long rest, you decide which of the which 6 out of the 15 you're going to do. And let's say you didn't pick counterspell, but in the middle of a battle you realize, hey, it'd be really cool to have counterspell here. And so you lie and say, oh, I prepared counterspell. And as a GM, I can tell you, even when we were in Foundry and I could look at the character sheets instantaneously, I just could not track all of that, right? Every single one of the characters, this is one of the things I hate about 5th edition D&D, every character casts spells. The fighter was an Eldritch Knight. There was a sorcerer, there was a cleric, and there was a ranger. So there was a rogue. The rogue was an NPC. That's the one I was controlling. Thank God he didn't cast spells. But all the other characters could spell cast. I can't keep track of that, right? Once they're like 10th level, there's like 40 or 50 possible spells that could be memorized across all of them. I don't know. I can't keep track of all that crap, right? If you're playing with players who are going to lie about what's on their character sheet, that's the bad Rob. You need to stop playing with them, right? We had one guy like that in our group, and he lasted a while. And when we realized he was doing it, he didn't last much past that. This sounds like the whole group is doing it. Number 40 seems related. If you do not mark off spell slots, or you say something like, I remember what I'm at, as a way to justify it, I will simply fail your spell. Deal half health and damage to you, and say you have no spells left to cast for the rest of the day. Right? This sounds like what we used to call the blue lightning, right? When somebody was really misbehaving as a player. The good Rob had invented this. Like, I guess he had seen it in D&D, and he started doing it in Champions. Didn't happen very often. I did it once to the bad Rob. Blue lightning. Oh, jeez, I've been running without this toggle the whole time. Blue lightning falls from this, like, cracks out of the sky and smashes into Nucleon, and he vanishes. You're out of the battle. I'm not going to argue with you anymore. And then, of course, he starts trying to argue about the blue lightning. That's not fair. You blue lightning my character. Didn't happen. Again, in my life, it happened 2 or 3 times, and I did it once. But this is a GM getting so angry at the cheating that they're lashing out, right? And again, when we did it, we were in 9th grade. We were not adults. As an adult, I wouldn't do that. I would simply say, I would say something like, I don't want to run anymore. Who wants to run? Like, I'm not going to babysit the players and ask them to submit spell lists and track spell slots directly in front of me in case they cheat, because I don't trust them, right? If I can't trust you to run your character, I don't want to play D&D with you or Champions or whatever, right? Like, I'm not going to babysit you. I don't, like, it's bad enough for me as a college professor that I have to constantly make sure that some, not all, but that some of my students are not cheating. Like, I hate doing that. Oh gosh, another sapper. I always get caught by them. Part of the problem is I can't, it's morning and I can't see in the dark. buildings. But I also didn't target these guys, which I should have. Um, so yeah, I mean, I get enough of that from the handful of students that I get every year. Right, it's not a lot, but in a class, if I have like 120 students across 3 classes, there are going to be, you know, 5 or 6 who would cheat if given the opportunity, and maybe even when not given the opportunity will try to cheat. And I've got to be on top of that. And that's my job, and I'm being paid to do it. But as a game master, If I have to if I have to proctor our game session so that you don't cheat, I'm not running a game session. I get enough of that proctoring tests. Like I even said to the biochemistry professor, and I were talking about this, and I said, I think the worst part of our job is proctoring exams. And she agreed. I said, I absolutely hate it. It's incredibly boring to sit there during a final exam for 2.5 hours and have to watch the students. Instead of like read a novel or something, I've got to sit there and watch everything they do. I can't even start grading exams until most of the room has cleared out, because while I'm distracted in grading exams, they'll take the opportunity. Not all of them. Again, it's not the majority of them. It's just a few. But I've got to keep my eye on those few. I just hate it. And then if you catch them, you have to deal with it. It's so frustrating and unpleasant to deal with cheaters that, like, the only reason I'm doing it is because I'm being paid to do it. It's the worst part of my job. I'm not bringing that mojo into my game session. If you can't, if my players can't be trusted to roll dice without me watching them and to mark off spell slots properly and stuff like that, I don't even want to play with them. And again, I'm going to cite the Wild Cards game. The players would narc on themselves and each other, and Garav Galati in particular, they would call it a self-narc, right? He'd say, wait a minute, no, I was at -2 there because of my fatigue, so I shouldn't have hit, and I shouldn't have done any of that damage. And the GM would give a Benny, great self-narc, have a Benny for that self-narc. That's what I do. If you self-narc, I'll give you, I don't want you narking other people, but if you self-narc, I'll give you a Benny, right? Which lets you re-roll later, right? So that's giving... that's giving kudos to the person who's being honest. And my players don't generally have to self-narc because we're playing in Foundry, and the system kind of narcs on you. It's really hard to it's hard to cheat in Foundry. You can, because there's nothing stopping you from like editing your character sheet and stuff. So you technically could, but it's very hard to cheat in Foundry when the GM can watch your character sheet, right? It's so easy to get caught. None of my players have ever done anything like that. Have they made mistakes? Yes, so have I, right? Oh man, I totally forgot this guy was at -2. I'm sorry, guys. We're just going to go with it for now, but I'm going to give him -4 on his next roll to make up for it, right? And the player's like, okay, that's fair, right? You're a human. You're a human being. You forgot the penalty. It's not a big deal, right? Sometimes I forget the bonus too, right? I mean, it's never on purpose, and the same thing with my players. We never do it on purpose because we would consider it's not any fun, right? It's like cheating doesn't make it fun; it makes it boring. So I've never had to worry about this, thankfully. But it sounds like this guy is playing with a bunch of players who are cheaters, who are trying to win D&D. He needs another group. Number 41, if you break literally anything, you can buy the replacement that day or do not attend until you do. I'm assuming he means something physical? It doesn't sound like an in-game. So if you break literally anything, what would they break? A chair that you're sitting on? You want me to go out and buy a new chair today? What else would you break? Breaking, you can't, it's really hard to break dice. Break a pencil, just get another pencil. He talked about damaging his DM screen, but that doesn't sound like broken, right? It sounds like it was made wet by something being spilled on it. Like, I'm not entirely sure what he means there. I guess, break my expensive fountain pen, you buy me a new one, but most of the stuff that you could break that would need to be replaced. I don't know how you could replace it that day. We're in a game session. Do you want me to stop and go out to Kmart and buy you a new item? It's a little strange. But again, it sounds like he's got these horrible players who are just breaking things and trying to cheat and all the rest of it. Man, it takes a long time to get all my buffs going. Oh, and there's a sapper that I didn't see again. How many times am I going to not see a sapper? What is that, the 5th time? 6th time since we started fighting Malta? And so the low endurance, that's coming, even though I've got strength of will going, right? The low endurance is happening because when the sapper hits you like that, they apply like a damage over time, like an endurance over time debuff to you. It's like an endurance strain over time. So it's not damage over time, but it's endurance strain over time. This teleporting guy is going to annoy the crap out of me, isn't he? See if we can stun him. And we rescued the girl. And we just had to defeat everybody in here, I guess. So we got to defeat the raid leader and his crew. Or kidnapper and his crew. And we don't need these puppies anymore, so we can turn them off. Okay, enough about that one. Next one. If you complain about the choice of music, I fully expect you to bring the whole playlist the next session or shut the bleep up. I don't know. I mean, again, it sounds like these players are being very demanding, right? I don't know. We rarely used music. When we did, most people appreciated the fact that the GM went to the trouble to create music. I know my players thought I was being kind of silly. I used to use the Darth Vader Imperial March for Overlord. And so Overlord would show up in a dan 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 dan. And I mean, I think they thought it was a little goofy, but they also thought it was cool that I did soundtracks. And I remember the one guy had us playing in the Flash Gordon universe, and he took the soundtrack from the Flash Gordon movie that came out in the 80s. Flash, dun, dun, ah, right? And he had the soundtrack, and he recorded certain parts of it, and he had this like big, like boombox or whatever in his house, and he would just play, like, there was a huge battle we were fighting, and he played the battle from the soundtrack while we were fighting that battle and stuff like that. It was pretty cool. I mean, we all liked it. He did that. That was the first time anybody ever did a soundtrack, as we called it, to our adventures. And once he did it, then I started doing it, and then my best friend started doing it, and everybody was doing it, right? I used to like soundtracks of movies, so I had like the E.T. soundtrack, the Indiana Jones soundtracks, the Star Wars, so I had Star Wars Empire, Return of the Jedi. My sister had Star Wars. I had Empire and Return of the Jedi, but my sister didn't care about it by that age. She'd switched to liking rock music, and so she gave me her Star Wars soundtrack. And then I had Raiders of the Lost Ark and Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, and I had E.T., and I had, what else did I have? I had about 10 of them, different soundtracks. And so I would pick out cool music. Oh, I also had Holst's The Planets suite, which has some pretty cool stuff, and some of it is actually what John Williams used to base like the not the Imperial March, but like the Rebel spaceship theme. Comes from the Mars theme. That's Mars, and he basically took some of those beats, the Venus theme. A lot of that is some of those beats were taken and used to make Princess Leia's theme and stuff like that. By the way, there is a recording out there where John Williams conducted Holst's Planets. It's amazing, best version ever. So I used to have soundtracks and play them. Nobody ever complained about it, so I don't know. So I will say this: I did get, and not necessarily a complaint. I asked for feedback, and I was given honest feedback, and I said, okay, fine. Right? I think I've mentioned this. Foundry lets you play music, so I had some pretty cool soundtracks. And I ran them a couple of times, and there was like background ambient music, so you're in a dungeon and you hear little dripping noises and little like whispering noises and stuff like that, and it's pretty cool. And so I was playing the ambient music, and then like if there was a boss fight, I played a little bit of music and stuff. And my best friend I know really liked it. He thought this was cool. He told me that afterwards, but I knew he would like it because he likes stuff like that. At one point we took a break. He was still hadn't come back from the break yet. The other two players were in, and I said, "What do you guys think of the ambient sounds and the music and stuff?" And they were like, "Yeah, we turn them off. We find them distracting. I can't hear what people are saying over it." The one guy was saying, "I've got the ambient music going in one ear and your voice is going in the other ear," because he didn't have headphones at that point, and he was like, "Yeah, it's very confusing." The girl was like, "Yeah, it's all coming in through the same thing in my headphones, and unfortunately, I can't hear what people are saying." So I use it sparingly, but I don't play it for long because I know that two of the players don't like it. If you don't like it, I won't do it. I don't know. He's just so hostile about everything, and I think it's because the players have been kind of antagonistic toward him. You got a toxic GM playing with toxic players. It sounds like, and man, what a dysfunctional group. 43. I cannot stress enough how little I care about how you feel about my rulings from now on. Okay, as a game master, that is not a good way to feel. I want my players to feel like I'm fair. And if they feel like I'm unfair, then I'm doing something wrong as a GM. I think it's really easy to solve this. You roll in the open. You're completely open about what you're doing. And you have a smile on your face when you're running the game. And you do things that are fun for the players. And they enjoy it. And you enjoy them enjoying it. And it's pretty easy to see when your GM is enjoying you enjoying it, right? My best friend ran for 6 months. He ran about 10 or 12 sessions, right? And I could tell there were some sessions where things just didn't work. And he got frustrated, not at us, but at himself, because he felt like I should have made this work better. And he even said to me, there were several of the sessions he was very disappointed in because he felt like he either let things go on too long and it got boring, like he let things drag out and it got boring. There was an awesome scene, actually, where we were dealing with, it was sort of like a haunted house, and there was this little girl, I think, like the ghost of a little girl that was like attacking us or whatever. And as players, because it was this ghost of a murdered little girl, I think he expected us to fight it. But my character was good, and she didn't want to attack it. And two of the other players also, their characters didn't want to attack it. And so, again, it was kind of my fault because I was like, okay, my character, my elf, doesn't want to attack here, so she's gonna like buff this other character. And then, like, we were trying to like calm it down, the ghost, and try to see reason. And so my best friend, this was such a great move. He thought about this. We'd done a couple of rounds of combat where nobody was attacking but the ghost, and he finally said, "Okay, guys, let's stop the combat. Let's do a skill challenge." And see if you can persuade this ghost to give up its violence and to accept that it's dead, right? A bad game master would just keep that fight going and just basically have the ghost attack you until you guys give up and say, fine, we're going to have to kill it, right? And that breaks the players' hearts. As players, we don't want our characters killing this, presumably innocent ghost. And he was really good as a GM. That was like one of the best rulings or GM moments, I would say, of all of the gaming we have played, with me as a GM, him as a GM, the one other guy who GM'd for a short campaign. That was an excellent pivot. This is what a good GM does. He pivoted. He saw my players, it's in my notes that they're supposed to fight this ghost, but my players would rather make peace with it. I'm going to give them a chance to do that. Right? He pivoted. He did exactly the right thing in making it a skill challenge. And then we tried different skills to calm down right? It was like, I don't know, we had 3 rounds. We had to get so many successes, 7 successes before 3 failures or whatever it was. And it was pretty darn close. And the ghost, like, we actually did some things that made the ghost angry because we failed. I think I rolled up a really bad failure on one of the things I tried to do, persuade or whatever. Um, it was much more fun for us. It was super exciting. We almost didn't succeed. And when we got the ghost to basically accept its death and go away happy, we cheered. We're like, yay! What an excellent moment, right? And that's because as a GM, he's our friend. He's trying to make us enjoy the game, and he's constantly watching how we're reacting to see if we like what's going on, and he's evaluating, right? So not only didn't he care little about what we thought of his rulings, he cared a lot, enough to completely change the scripted encounter to something totally different because he knew we would like it better. That's a good GM. That's how a GM should be. So this idea of I don't care whether you like it or not, that's not a good way to be. So this is a toxic GM with toxic players. That's what it sounds like to me. The last rule. Oh, and rule 44. I'm never just threatening you. I'm promising you. That's incredibly hostile. Folks, if you're in a game group like this, get out. Remember Matt Colville's rule. No D&D at all is way better than bad D&D. And it sounds like these people have been having bad D&D for a long time. All right, that is the end of the 44 rules of D&D. We're now about halfway to level 50. Let's take a look. We have 2.3 million XP left to go to get to level 50, guys. And that will be... So this is probably our final story arc. I'm not sure how many more missions there are, but I feel like 2 more sessions will be enough to finish us up. And then it will be time to make a Dominator. So if you haven't done so yet, please, in the comments, give me some ideas for... You give me character concept ideas. I'm not promising I'm going to take any. But go ahead and give me concept ideas for characters, for power sets. Tell me why you like them or why you think it would be fun. Especially concentrate not so much on super effective combos, but ones with really cool looking special effects. Because one of the things I really want to do with this character is get some of the really cool VFX. Ice and Fire are awesome. Dark has some cool VFX. Illusions has some cool VFX. Electricity has some cool VFX. I don't know if there's Electricity Dominators, but there's some really cool visual effects in this game. A lot of the powers have really cool effects, and I like the here the glowing fists. Man, I love that. Right. So I want something that I like just as much. Right. The reason I took energy melee was because I liked the way the punches look and sound with the glowing hands, not because I thought energy had good powers. Same thing with the Dominator. You can suggest ones that are really effective, but I'm actually more interested in it looking cool and being fun to play. So keep that in mind. Give me your suggestions. Let me know what you think I should play. And sometime in the next week or two, maybe by around 4th of July, we will be starting a brand new character. I would almost like to do a special on 4th of July with this character because she is Miss America here, Liberty Lass. But sometime around 4th of July, we'll probably be starting a new character, and it will be a Dominator. So go ahead and leave your suggestions below. Can't promise I'm going to do anything in particular, but I'll definitely take them into consideration, since I really don't have a concept yet. Until next time, guys, I am Scrapperlock, and this has been City of Heroes.